Today is the 3rd of June. The calendar says, Family BBQ, maybe. But the phone hasn't rung in weeks. She checks it anyway. No missed calls. No messages. Just silence. It's not just the absence of a ringtone. It's the weight of wondering why. Why the children who once clung to her skirt now can't seem to remember she exists. She raised them in church. Kissed, scraped knees. Stayed up late praying for their safety during storms and first heartbreaks. And now? They're busy. They've moved. They've changed. And she wonders, have I become disposable? Her name is Martha, a 69-year-old Christian mother from North Carolina, widowed, strong in faith. But lately, she feels like her voice has disappeared from her children's world. The youngest, Michael, used to leave her sticky notes on the fridge. You're the best mom ever. Now, she gets an occasional forwarded meme with no words, just silence wrapped in pixels. Lisa, her oldest, texts once a month. And her middle son, David? Nothing in 2 years. She's not mad, not bitter, just hollow. She makes extra servings out of habit, leaves the porch light on out of hope, and keeps the family Bible open on the kitchen table like a door God might walk through. One night, she sat with a lukewarm cup of tea and whispered, Lord, I did what you asked. I gave them everything. Why does it feel like I lost them anyway? And that's when she heard it, not in her ears, but in her spirit. A voice, still and strong. You are not forgotten. You are being remembered by heaven. It was Archangel Michael, and he had a message. They may have stopped calling, but God hasn't stopped speaking. This is not just Martha's ache. This is your ache. You faithful parent who poured your soul into raising a family, only to feel like you were left behind once they grew wings. You, the one who wonders if you were only needed during diapers and dinners, and discarded when your hands had no more sandwiches to make. But listen closely. This is not the end of love. This is the beginning of rediscovery. And Archangel Michael has 3 sacred truths to restore your heart. He calls it the Heavenly Remembrance System, a simple but divine path for the forgotten parent. And step 1 begins with this truth. You were not created to be remembered by men. You were created to be treasured by God. That doesn't mean the ache isn't real. It means heaven sees what your children forget. Every time you wept alone on the floor. Every time you gave the bigger piece. Every time you sat through their tantrums, their silence, their rebellion without leaving. Heaven was watching. And heaven is still speaking. But will you listen? Because the voice of God can restore what human silence took away. The next morning, Martha woke with tears still drying on her cheeks. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years. But last night felt different. Because in that quiet ache, heaven didn't just hear her. Heaven answered. Archangel Michael's presence lingered like the scent of her mother's perfume, soft but unmistakable. And she remembered his words. They may have stopped calling, but God hasn't stopped speaking. Martha sat by the window and opened her Bible to a verse underlined decades ago. Isaiah 49:15. Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has born? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. She read it aloud, slowly, as if heaven needed to hear her voice too. I will not forget you. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, she felt held. Michael's message continued. There is power in unseen obedience. You might feel invisible now, but the prayers you whispered, the forgiveness you gave, the love you gave without return, it all echoes in the courts of heaven. It was never wasted. You see, earth forgets, but heaven archives. Every night you stayed awake waiting for your child to come home, every meal you cooked when your body ached, every moment you swallowed your pain to hold theirs, God saw it, and He sees you still. Michael calls this step in the Heavenly Remembrance System, the anointing of the unseen. It's the moment when you stop asking the world to notice and start trusting that the one who matters already has. Martha leaned into that truth. She didn't stop loving her children, but she stopped begging for breadcrumbs of attention. She began doing something radical, blessing them in silence. Every morning, she would whisper their names aloud and declare, "Michael, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Lisa, may heaven chase after your heart. David, may you remember who you are." She didn't send it in a text, didn't try to guilt them with reminders. She just released them into God's hands. Because sometimes love must let go. To let God begin. A week later, something strange happened. A letter came in the mail, handwritten, from David, the one who hadn't spoken in 2 years. He wrote, "Mom, I don't know why, but I thought of you when I couldn't sleep. I remembered that time I was sick and you stayed up all night reading Psalms to me. I'm sorry I've been distant. Just wanted you to know I love you." Martha wept in silence, not because she needed an apology, but because the seeds she planted in the dark were starting to grow. Michael whispered again, "Your words may not reach their phones, but they always reach their hearts when spoken from your spirit." This is the power of spiritual parenting. Not control, not guilt, but divine release. The moment you understand your children were never yours to keep, only yours to love and trust to God. Here's your action step. Every morning this week, speak your children's names aloud. Bless them, not to change them, but to free your heart from the burden of their silence. Because when you speak heaven's words, even earthly silence cannot block the sound. It had been years since Martha felt this kind of peace. Not because everything had changed on the outside. The phone still didn't ring often. The holidays still felt uncertain. And yet, her spirit no longer trembled in that silence. Something had shifted. Because she was no longer holding out for a call. She was holding on to her calling. Archangel Michael returned again in the quiet of her morning prayers. And this time, his message wasn't about waiting. It was about walking forward. You are not abandoned. You have been assigned. That sentence became like fire in her chest. Because here's what most parents forget. When your children grow up and go silent, it's not the end of your purpose. It's the beginning of your legacy. Michael's next law in the heavenly remembrance system is called the mantle of continuing love. It means this: even when they don't reach back, you are still reaching forward with eternal impact. Let me explain. In the Bible, Hannah prayed for a child, Samuel. She wept, she pleaded, and when God answered her, she gave Samuel back to him. She didn't cling, she released. And that boy? He became a prophet, a voice of God in a nation that had lost its way. Why? Because he was carried on the back of his mother's prayers. Martha realized this one morning as she walked through the garden in her backyard. She stopped near the rose bush she and Michael had planted when he was 7. It had overgrown, bloomed, wild unattended, yet beautiful. And that's when she saw the metaphor. Some seeds bloom after we stop tending them, because God waters what we planted in faith. She dropped to her knees by that bush and cried for every mother who never got a thank you, every father who watched their son drift away, every grandparent whose wisdom sat unread in letters and old voicemails. Then she said aloud, "I release them, Lord. I trust that what I poured into them didn't vanish. It's just taking root deeper than I can see." That night, she received a message. Not a phone call, but a voicemail. Lisa's voice is soft, unsure. "Hey, Mom, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I'm sorry I haven't reached out. I think I miss you more than I realized. Can we talk soon?" Martha didn't cry this time. She smiled. Because she knew this wasn't just coincidence. This was what Michael meant. When you carry the mantle of continuing love, your children will feel your spirit before they hear your voice. This is not manipulation. This is not performance. This is spiritual parenting. You don't stop mothering or fathering because they grow up. You just start doing it with heaven's hands. Your action step today is bold but freeing. Bless them out loud. Then live your life. Go walk. Go serve. Go laugh with friends. Paint something. Sing something. Volunteer at your church. Because your love is still being used by God even if it's not being noticed by man. And here's what Michael says next. When you stop waiting by the phone, you start hearing heaven's call louder. And that call? It never goes unanswered. There's a kind of freedom that doesn't shout. It doesn't come wrapped in an apology. It doesn't arrive with balloons or grand gestures. It comes in the form of deep knowing. You are still loved, even when others forget to show it. Martha walked into her church on a quiet Sunday morning. No one knew what she'd been through in the past few weeks. But as the worship team began to sing, she didn't just sing along. She worshiped from the place of surrender, because she had learned something holy. Your children's silence doesn't silence God's voice. Archangel Michael spoke again that morning, not in words, but in understanding. You are not just their mother, you are heaven's messenger. This was the next and most empowering step in the heavenly remembrance system. The role of the remnant. Let me explain. In the Bible, when Israel lost its way, there was always a remnant. A small group of faithful ones who kept the fire of belief burning. They didn't lead armies. They didn't hold power. They just remembered. They prayed. They carried hope like it was oxygen. And because they remained, faithful generations were restored. Martha understood now. She wasn't abandoned. She was positioned. Positioned to be the spiritual covering her children didn't even know they still needed. She didn't need to beg for connection. She needed to keep the light on. The porch light. The spiritual light. The kind of light that doesn't demand but always welcomes. Because prodigals don't return to locked doors. They come home to light. One evening, Martha received a phone call from a neighbor. It wasn't about her children. It was about a young mother, 3 houses down, struggling, overwhelmed, and alone. Without hesitation, Martha walked to that house, knocked, and said, "Hi, I raised 3. I know what this feels like. You don't have to do it alone." The young woman burst into tears. And that's when Martha realized God hadn't just given her children. God had made her a mother to the broken. Michael whispered once more. When you take your eyes off what's not coming to you, you begin to see who needs what's inside you. Martha didn't stop loving her children, but she stopped letting their distance define her value. She became a well for others, a prayer warrior for women half her age, a grandmother figure to teens who'd never known gentle wisdom. And slowly, her own children started noticing. Not because she chased them, but because they felt her strength again. Your action step today is simple. Ask God, who needs the love I've been waiting to give? Then watch. Watch who walks into your life. Watch who starts texting out of nowhere. Watch who cries when you show up with a simple meal, because your value hasn't decreased. It's been redirected. And as Michael says, heaven doesn't waste faithful love. It just multiplies it in places you never expected. Today, Martha's house feels different. Not because the phone rings more often, though it does. Not because her children suddenly became perfect, but because the silence no longer controls her. Her joy is no longer waiting at the end of a call. It's rooted in something higher, something eternal, something heaven-born. Her mornings begin with praise now, not pleading. She still whispers her children's names in prayer, but her voice no longer trembles, it carries authority. She is no longer a forgotten mother. She is a called woman. And Archangel Michael's final message to her? What you gave in secret is being remembered in heaven. Now, walk in the reward of peace. This is the final and most beautiful layer of the heavenly remembrance system, the harvest of peace. It's the moment you stop asking, will they ever call again? And start declaring, even if they don't, I am still whole. Because peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of purpose. One Sunday afternoon, Michael, the youngest, surprised her. He showed up with 2 little ones she'd never met, her grandchildren. He looked nervous. "Mom, I know I've been distant. I don't really know how to explain why. But I want them to know you." I want them to have the kind of strength I remember feeling around you." Martha knelt, arms open, tears falling freely. Not tears of pain this time, but tears of divine release. Because what is remembered by heaven always finds its way back. She didn't need explanations. She only needed the moment. The children ran through her living room like it had always belonged to them. And in the corner of the room sat the Bible, still open, still waiting, still speaking. Here is your final action step. Sit with God, not to ask, not to plead, but to thank Him. Thank Him for the children who stretched your heart, for the silence that shaped your faith, for the love you gave that didn't go unnoticed in heaven. Then breathe deep, because today you are not waiting for a call. You are walking in a calling. And finally, Michael leaves you with this. Your voice is still powerful. Your love is still active. And your legacy is still alive. They may not call today, but one day they'll remember. Because God never stopped speaking through you. And love spoken in faith never dies.